Hey everybody, and welcome back to Robots vs. Vampires.
Yeah.
I'm Adrian Smith,
And I am Julia Jones, and
back with another daily deep dive into the world of sci-fi and fantasy.
into a world
Where robots clash with vampires.
where the future and the past collide
Exactly.
in a story that's going to keep you on the edge of your seat.
So strap yourselves in, folks.
We are talking about a top secret experiment called
Project Sunrise.
Project Sunrise.
Which sounds...
ambitious.
Yeah, very ambitious.
What's the big idea here?
What are they trying to do?
Well, they're not just tinkering with genes. They're talking about engineering a whole new race of vampires.
Vampires.
Humanity 2.0, but with fangs.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they're creating vampires from scratch.
Exactly.
How does that even work?
That's where the science part of science fiction comes in.
Okay.
They've managed to genetically engineer a vampire, codenamed Eve,
Eve.
but she's not exactly living the glamorous vampire life we see in the movies.
No velvet coffins or brooding castles.
Not quite. Eve's entire existence has been confined to a lab.
Oh, so very sterile.
Sterile environment.
Controlled.
Carefully controlled diet.
Okay.
And even tech that helps her tolerate sunlight.
So it's like,
Yeah.
that's not typical vampire behavior.
Exactly. It seems they're trying to eliminate the traditional weaknesses, pushing the boundaries of what a vampire can be.
Wow.
But here's the thing about controlled environments.
Yeah, they don't always stay controlled.
They don't always stay controlled.
So what happened? Did she escape?
You guessed it. During a major security breach with alarms blaring and chaos erupting,
Oh, wow.
Eve seizes the opportunity and makes a run for it.
A real fight-or-flight moment.
Yeah, it is.
I bet stepping out into the real world after a lifetime in the lab must have been overwhelming.
Absolutely. Think about it. Bustling crowds, the sun, the sheer volume of sensory input.
Oh, my God.
It would be a complete overload for anyone,
Especially with her heightened senses.
let alone someone with heightened senses like Eve.
Right.
Exactly.
So she's out in the world. But I'm guessing the lab isn't just going to let her walk away.
No, they're not.
What did they do?
They dispatched specialized hunters.
Hunters.
And these aren't your average vampire hunters.
Right.
They're enhanced, fasted, deadly.
Hmm.
Almost like Eve herself, but without that desperate hunger for freedom.
So almost like a game of cat and mouse,
Yeah.
but with much higher stakes.
Definitely.
Did Eve manage to evade them?
More than that. Remember, she spent her whole life learning about their tactics, their strengths, their weaknesses.
Oh, wow.
She uses this knowledge to her advantage.
So she's a quick learner.
She is.
But where could she possibly go to hide?
That's a good question. Where would a newly escaped vampire find refuge?
Yeah,
Ironically, Eve finds refuge in an abandoned church.
a church.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition.
A creature born of science, finding sanctuary in a place of faith.
Yeah,
But it's within this church that she stumbles upon something truly game-changing.
she does.
What did she find?
Hidden scrolls detailing the true objective of Project Sunrise.
And it wasn't to improve humanity.
It's not about improving humanity, it's about replacing it entirely.
Wow.
Eve wasn't meant to be a bridge to a brighter future, but the prototype for a new dominant species.
Talk about a harsh reality check.
Yeah, it is.
So how did she react to that discovery?
Well, just as she's processing this information,
Uh-oh.
the hunters catch up to her.
Okay.
And they come armed with silver bullets.
Oh, no.
Not exactly a friendly welcome.
Not at all.
Nope.
So what happens? Does she surrender?
Not a chance. She uses everything she's learned in the lab, every bit of training and knowledge to outmaneuver them in a truly impressive showdown.
So she takes them down,
She does.
but she doesn't kill them.
Exactly. She leaves them alive but wounded,
Sending a very clear message.
sending a message that
Yeah.
she's not someone to be messed with.
Do not mess with Eve.
It's a powerful moment of defiance.
So from this point on, she's not just a lab experiment anymore. She's Eve, a symbol of rebellion against the very forces that created her.
That's right. She reclaims her narrative, taking ownership of her identity
Wow.
and stepping into a world that's both terrifying and full of possibilities.
This is all fascinating, but we haven't talked much about the robots.
Right.
Where do they fit into this very vampire-centric world?
That's a question we'll explore in more depth as Eve's story unfolds. If the lab is determined to bring her back, they might escalate their efforts.
Okay.
And that could very well involve advanced robotics.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine robots designed to track, hunt, and perhaps even reason.
Robots versus vampires.
Now that's a matchup I wouldn't want to miss.
We'll have to wait and see what happens next.
Exactly. And we'll be back to unpack it all for you in part 2.
Yeah, we'll be back.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Okay, so we're back for part 2 of our deep dive into this world of robots versus vampires. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm
It's pretty intense.
finding this whole Project Sunrise thing pretty ethically murky.
Yeah, it definitely raises a lot of questions. We're talking about creating a whole new species, essentially, playing God with evolution.
Right.
Is that something we have the right to do?
Yeah, it really makes you think about, the line between scientific advancement and, meddling with forces we don't really fully understand.
Right, and it's not just about the act of creation itself.
Right.
What about the rights of these engineered beings?
Yeah.
Eve clearly demonstrates intelligence, emotions, free will.
Yeah.
Does she have the same rights as any other sentient being?
It's a big one.
It is.
It seems like, the scientists behind Project Sunrise were much more focused on control than on, the ethical implications of what they were doing.
Exactly. It's a cautionary tale about the potential dangers of scientific progress without ethical considerations.
Yeah,
Just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should.
absolutely. But let's shift gears a little bit and talk about those robots.
Yes.
We mentioned earlier, you said the lab might deploy them to try and recapture Eve. That's where the versus in robots versus vampires really comes into play, right?
Right, and think about the possibilities here. What kind of technology would be needed to hunt down a super fast, super strong vampire with heightened senses?
Yeah, so I imagine we're talking drones,
So,
advanced tracking systems, maybe even weapons that are specifically designed to counter, Eve's different abilities.
exactly. Maybe sonic disruptors to interfere with her hearing, or nets woven with silver to restrain her.
Wow.
It sets up an incredible clash between the primal power of the vampire and the cold, calculating logic of the machines.
It's almost like a classic monster movie meets a futuristic thriller.
Yeah.
But here's a thought. What if the robots, through their interactions with Eve,
Okay.
start to evolve beyond their programming?
Now that's an intriguing possibility. Could they develop something akin to empathy? Could they start to question their orders, recognizing Eve as a being worthy of their protection rather than their pursuit?
That would be a wild twist.
That would be
a rebellion of the machines, but not in the way that we typically imagine it.
right.
This time they're siding with the monster.
It would definitely challenge our perceptions of both artificial intelligence and what it means to be alive. Could it be that even a machine can recognize the injustice of a situation, the inherent right to freedom?
That's a question that blurs the lines between science fiction and philosophy.
It does.
And it's all happening against the backdrop of this epic escape and chase.
Yeah.
Where do we leave Eve at this point in the story?
We left her on the run, a fugitive in a world that doesn't understand her, pursued by both her creators and potentially their robotic creations.
There's a real fight for survival on multiple fronts.
It is.
And we, the audience, are left wondering, will she be caught?
Right.
Will she find allies? Will she ultimately be the destroyer or the savior of her own kind?
All great questions, and we'll be back to explore those possibilities and delve even deeper into the robot side of the equation in part 3 of our deep dive into robots versus vampires.
And we're back for the final part of our robots versus vampires deep dive.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, this Eve story, man, it really has me hooked.
It really is a page-turner, isn't it?
Yeah.
But beyond the action and the suspense,
Yeah.
there's this whole deeper layer here that really gets you thinking.
You're right. It's not just about, these vampires and robots battling it out.
Right.
It's these bigger questions, about what it means to be human,
Exactly.
to have free will to control your own destiny.
And those questions become even more complex when you bring in the robots,
Yeah.
What happens when artificial intelligence starts to evolve?
Yeah.
When it starts to develop its own sense of morality, maybe even empathy?
It really makes you wonder if that line between,
Mm-hmm.
creator and creation
Right.
is really as clear as we think it is.
Yeah.
What if these robots,
Yeah.
these machines that are designed to hunt and capture Eve,
Mm-hmm.
start to see things a little differently?
What if they start to see her not as a threat, but as a victim? A being fighting for her freedom against the very forces that brought her into existence?
That would be a serious game changer.
It would.
It would be this rebellion from within the ranks of the lab itself.
Right.
A twist that, nobody could have predicted.
It would raise some serious questions about the unintended consequences of our technology.
Yeah.
About the ripple effects of our actions, even when we think we're in control.
Absolutely. And, we also have to remember that Eve's escape was just the beginning.
Yeah.
Who knows what kind of chain reaction she might set off in the world?
That is a thought-provoking question, isn't it? What if her story inspires others, like her, other engineered beings who have been denied their freedom?
Right.
What if she becomes the symbol of hope?
Yeah.
A beacon of resistance against those who seek to control and manipulate life itself.
It's like a spark igniting a revolution.
Yeah.
And it's not just a revolution of vampires, but of, all beings who yearn for that autonomy,
Right.
who refuse to be defined by their creators.
It's a vision of the future that's both exhilarating and terrifying.
Yeah.
This future where the lines between human and machine, natural and artificial, become increasingly blurred.
And in that future, who knows what kind of alliances will be forged?
Right.
Who will stand with Eve and who will stand against her?
Those are questions we can't answer just yet.
Right.
But one thing is for sure, this battle for the future, it's far from over.
Yeah.
And the outcome is anything but certain.
So as we wrap up this robots versus vampires deep dive, I'm left with this sense of wonder,
Yeah.
of anticipation,
For sure.
of wanting to know what happens next.
And that's the beauty of a story like this.
Yeah.
It leaves you with more questions than answers.
Right.
It leaves you with that lingering feeling that anything is possible.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that the future isn't something that's written in stone.
Yeah.
It's something that we are shaping, through our choices, our actions, and our willingness to question the status quo.
And sometimes it's the most unexpected heroes who lead the way, challenging our perceptions, inspiring us to imagine a world that's different, bolder, and maybe even a little bit more dangerous.
Well said, Julia. Thanks for joining me on this wild ride through the world of robots versus vampires.
It's been a blast.
It's been a blast, and to all of our listeners out there,
Yeah.
keep those imaginations running wild.
Keep exploring.
And never underestimate the power of a good story to, challenge our assumptions.
Absolutely.
Make us think about the future in new and exciting ways.
Yeah.
So until next time, stay curious
Stay engaged.
and keep exploring the endless possibilities of sci-fi and fantasy.